the essence of childhood has been destroyed. They're intentionally targeting children for assault, torture, and murder. This video is not going to be easy to listen to, but it is really important that we continue to bear witness. It's really important that we understand what our tax dollars are going toward. An independent report came out this past week from the United Nations that shows that the Israeli government, the Israeli occupation force in Gaza, is deliberately targeting children. The American taxpayer funds about 2/3 of Israel's military operations in the Middle East. So when we understand what is happening and we understand that our tax dollars are funding it, we can decide to choose differently as a nation. I put out a video, a couple weeks ago, where I talked about how now that the cat is out of the bag, we cannot unsee what we have seen. We cannot return to a state of ignorance. We must continue to bear witness. There's no going back for Israel. They can't re-propagandize us. They can't take us back to a time where we had not seen what they have done to little children, what they have done to families, the way that they are committing ecocide in the Middle East, the way that they are genociding an entire people in the name of what? Power, land, and profit.
The strongest evidence is the use of what I would call a combination of quadcopters, sniper rifles, and drones. Quadcopters are pre-fitted with thermal imaging cameras, which tell the person viewing the screen whether the image on the screen belongs to a child or an adult. Israeli soldiers are seen speaking on videos which they have uploaded on social media, or it's on the television channels in Israel, where they proudly proclaim that it is like a game for them. They can sit anywhere and shoot Palestinians by just looking at a screen. They get commended by their commanders for using this kind of a tactic. The second thing is we're finding that these gunshot wounds are specifically directed at the head and the neck, the upper portions of the body, for maximum damage. So you have a 10-day-old baby while breastfeeding being shot through the head using a quadcopter weapon, and the baby is now in permanent paralysis. Then the kind of pellets used, these are cube-shaped pellets, which enter the body. The baby's body is very small, and then it travels through the body, causing maximum damage to internal organs. So this time in Geneva, we held public hearings where 3 doctors participated, and they told us that they haven't seen this trend of injuries specific to children. The adult is holding the child is injured, the adult is not injured. So you can clearly make out from these trends that children are very specific targets for the Israeli Defense Forces. And this is not surprising when you think of the utterances of far-right politicians in Israel who say that every child is a future terrorist, and that every child in Gaza has to be eliminated. These statements we have quoted. This mentality has then percolated to the Israeli Defense Forces and the soldiers, who then think they can act with impunity. How else would you explain an Israeli soldier filming himself, proudly proclaiming having killed a child? I mean, this is unbelievable.
Well, let me tell you then, because we asked the Israeli foreign minister, as you can imagine, Srinivasan, for a comment. They've come back to us, and they basically call the report a libelous sham that relies on demagoguery rather than evidence, and argues that the Commission lacks any credible verification mechanism for its claims. Or as you can see there, whose very purpose is single out and vilify Israel rather than seek the truth. How do you respond to that?
One is that every time we prepare a report, a draft of the report is sent in advance to the Permanent Commission for Israel in the UN. And we ask for their comments. We send it even to the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority gives its comments. We incorporate some of their comments into our reports. The Israeli authorities never respond. After becoming a chair, I sent a note verbal to the Permanent Mission for Israel. No response. We want Israel to engage with the Commission. We want for them to come forth with whatever material they have. If they want to prove us wrong, let us see the material they have. We adopt completely scientific methods. We have explained the methodology in paras 8 and 10 of our report. We cross-verify the facts. We don't rely on just one source. We use, geolocation techniques. We have military analysis of weapons used, of the bullets used. We have medical evidence. We have forensic evidence. We have analysis of electronic evidence. And it's a very, very rigorous process. I can confidently state we have a team of 12 people, professional, and completely committed to uncovering the truth. So they never, ever rely on only a single source of evidence. Having said that, I would invite Israeli authorities to look at the evidence we have. We're prepared to share with them the evidence we have. Let them see it for themselves, because there is no purpose to be served in falsely accusing anyone. Now, Israel prepared an 18-page rebuttal to the latest report. And there is no denial by them of the evidence, incriminating evidence that Israeli soldiers have placed on social media and on the web. They have not denied any of that. And then they accuse us of being silent on the violence of Hamas. And here I want to point out that just on 15th June 2026, we submitted a report to the Human Rights Council on non-state actors, which include settlers in West Bank, their actions, and the activities of Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups in Gaza. And there we have specifically adverted to the violence committed by Hamas against children.
So obviously all of the warnings for the next few clips, but I really want you to listen and watch. The more educated we are, the more informed we become, the more that we are inspired, we are motivated to take action, to protect human life, to protect little children. We don't have to continue to fund this. AIPAC is now deeply unpopular. In fact, American politicians are distancing themselves. They're trying to minimize how much AIPAC is funding them because they know that the voters are horrified that we have been propagandized so heavily to believe that our tax dollars should go toward Israel's defense, when what it's really going toward is Israel's atrocities, Israel's war crimes that they are committing.
I must share with all of you that apart from the sources that we've quoted in the report, we also conducted oral hearings after we arrived here in Geneva this time. And 3 of the doctors who were involved in treatment of children in Gaza spoke to us. And they confirmed what the report has found on the basis of available material, that the gunshot wounds were specifically directed at the head and the neck to cause maximum damage. In one instance, a breastfeeding baby was shot by a quadcopter through the head, and the baby now suffers a permanent paralysis. So there have been all these instances quoted in the report of specific targeting of children. Quadcopters, as all of you are aware, has thermal imagery. It has infrared heat cameras, which can tell you the shape of the body. And so the soldiers are able to immediately detect, sitting wherever they are, that this is a child who appears on the screen. And indeed, it is like a game for them. And we have quoted that in the report, where the soldiers say that they can, let me quote this. In the IT VX documentary, Breaking Ranks Inside Israel's War, one Israeli soldier described, "The drones, in my opinion, are what most dehumanizes the other side. You see everything on a screen. You drop the bomb. It feels like a game. You can sit in some basement of a house, safe, with your helmet off, scratching your balls, half-dressed, and kill Palestinians." This is a quotation. This is why I say Israeli soldiers have themselves put on the public domain so much incriminating evidence about what they've been doing.
And I see in the back corner of a room, there's a young child, and he's not really moving. He's just sort of kind of staring into space, and he has something in his hand. And I'm trying to make sense of what's in his hand because I can see it's quite bloody. When the scene begins to die down, I ask my colleague, a nurse, Abdullah, I said, "What is that little boy okay? Like, what does he have in his hand?" And Abdullah says to me, "Oh, that's his brother's jaw." Oh. And I remember being really taken aback by this, and he said it in such a way that it was as if I had asked him, what's the weather like outside? And he's like, oh, it's raining. It was so matter of fact. You know, and I've been trying to make sense of that moment for a really long time. I've been trying to make sense of the trauma in that room and trying to understand what the forces are that brought us to that day. And these are questions that I'll be spending the rest of my life trying to figure out.
So what can we do? What can we as Americans do right now? Well, you may be aware that this is a problem that is not confined to the Republicans. The funding of Israel's genocide is not confined to the Republicans. There are a lot of Democrats in Congress who are bought and paid for by AIPAC. In fact, it was a bipartisan effort to push forward this integration of the Israeli and United States militaries under the National Defense Authorization Act. So what can we do? What can we as Americans do to stop our tax dollars from funding these crimes against humanity, from funding these atrocities? Well, we understand that this is a problem in both parties in Congress. AIPAC, the Israel lobby, has bought and paid for politicians in both parties. And we see plenty of evidence of that, including the fact that it was a bipartisan effort to forward Section 224 of the National Defense Authorization Act that will basically merge the Israeli and United States militaries. It will commingle those resources, that intelligence sharing, et cetera, that funding, to a point where it will become very difficult for us, the taxpayer, to have oversight. It moves all of the funding. Right now, funding for Israel is publicly debated on the floor of Congress. It is done in the form of aid, right? And so we can have a vigorous public debate about it. And as public opinion has so massively turned against this funding, because we know it's not for aid, it's for atrocities, Bibi Netanyahu reached out to members of Congress and personally said, like, hey, I want you to put this provision in there that commingles our military intelligence and military funding in a way that pushes it behind the curtain, that makes it opaque so that the taxpayer can't see what's happening and our tax money continues to be funneled. Our surveillance, our intelligence continues to be entwined with Israel, even more entwined, so that, and Democrats are responsible for that as much as Republicans. Now, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie tried to stop it, and there's been a huge amount of public opposition. But still, so many members of Congress are beholden to AIPAC. They are bought and paid for by AIPAC. And so they went ahead and furthered this, even though so many intelligence officials, so many organizations said, this is a really bad idea. We as a sovereign nation should not be having this kind of extensive melding of our military with another country's military. This is a bad idea on a national security level. And then in the past week, we've seen many humanitarian organizations, including Amnesty International, come out and say Congress must oppose U.S. and military integration and co-production. I'm going to read here briefly from Amnesty International's press release from 3 days ago. Congress is currently considering a deeply troubling proposal to expand cooperation and coordination between the U.S. and Israeli militaries as part of the NDAA, which is the annual legislative package that outlines the budget and policies for the Department of Defense. The U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative was quietly added to the NDAA in both the House and Senate versions, and it would expand joint defense technology, research, development, testing, evaluation, integration, and co-production. Members of Congress must ensure the removal of this provision from the NDAA. Amnesty International has continued to call on the U.S. government to immediately suspend the supply, sale, or transfer of all weapons, munitions, and other military and security equipment to Israel, including the provision of training and other military and security assistance. The risk is clear that any U.S. military and security support provided to the Israeli government would be used to commit genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, as well as other serious violations of international law. The U.S. should be disengaging itself from the lawlessness of Israel's military operations in the region, including in the occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, and Syria. Instead, This provision seeks to further entrench the U.S.-Israel military relationship at a time when support for restricting arms sales to Israel has reached unprecedented levels in Congress. In the House earlier this year, 75 members from both parties signed on to the Block the Bombs Act. And in the Senate in April of this year, 40 senators voted to block shipments of bulldozers and 1,000-pound bombs to Israel. Please understand that that is happening because of feedback from you. That's happening because of pressure from you, the constituents. You are giving the political capital, you are building the political will for members of Congress to stand up and say, we will no longer fund this. So please keep it up. Please keep up your calls and your emails. Show up and meet with your electeds. Show up and protest. Congress has the responsibility to ensure the U.S. is no longer enabling and fueling the atrocities of the Israeli government. This requires opposing efforts to expand U.S. military integration and co-production, and includes removing the U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative from the NDAA and blocking all arms transfers to Israel. We already have a law on the books. It's called the Leahy Law. It says that we cannot provide weapons or military funding to other countries when they are committing atrocities. Congress is already violating that law. It's going to require mass public pressure from us to see this NDAA not get funded with this absolutely insane integration of the U.S. and Israeli militaries. Again, it's not just that our tax dollars are funding a genocide and ethnic cleansing in Palestine. We are now, if this goes through, we will now be entrenched in Israel's efforts to commit war crimes in Lebanon and Syria. Bibi Netanyahu, just like Vladimir Putin, just like Donald Trump, just like Hitler, all of these malignant narcissists want their own Lebensraum. They want to go conquer other countries. They need war to continue to justify their authoritarian regimes. Israel wants to take over Lebanon and Syria, the entire Middle East. They want to exterminate all Arabs. They want to use American tax dollars to do it. They are right now geofencing churches in the United States, targeting Christian churches. Israel is. They're spending millions of dollars on messaging to try and propagandize Americans, because you know the bulk of Zionists, you guys, they're not Jewish, they're American evangelicals. Support for Israel happens because a propaganda machine from AIPAC, from Israel, has hoodwinked American Christians into unconditional funding and support for Israel's genocide. But we don't have to, and we cannot continue to do this. Now that people are becoming aware, people are saying we don't want to fund this. We don't want to be part of this. It requires us getting our elected officials on board with us. And if they won't get on board, if they are Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and they insist on funding all of these atrocities because it's Israel's money that has made their political careers, then it's up to us to vote them out. The people have the power. We absolutely can stop funding this.